Hi there, it's Nicole Spohr and welcome back to my channel. Today we have some more Make Magic release cards featuring all new products from the Simon Says Stamp Make Magic release. We're going to create some celestial cards with backgrounds, dies, stamps, and more. So these are the two cards I created. I love the colors. We're even going to feature the brand new Tim Holtz Prize Ribbon Distress Oxide ink, starting with bases of colorful cardstock. Starting with a base of colorful cardstock is going to make it so we don't have to add quite as much ink as you would to a white cardstock base. So I needed a new sheet in my MISTI here, and I accidentally put a little too much adhesive down. I like to put a little adhesive so that when I am stamping with a background stamp, I don't have to put the panel right next to the edge of the MISTI. This is going to ensure that the entire 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch background is completely covered. We are going to be using the stained glass background. When I saw this background stamp in my box, I was so excited. I love this background. I can see using this for all kinds of things, but it looks amazing for a kind of celestial type of card as well. It's really, really beautiful. I think it's a fantastic addition to anybody's craft stash because there's just so many uses for a versatile background. I am stamping this on some Simon Says Stamp Sea Glass cardstock. So this is a really pretty nice light blue. We're not going to really be left with much of this blue cardstock, but as I mentioned, we aren't going to have to add near as much ink to the cardstock panel to get the absorption and get the color that I'm wanting for this background. Now I'm also using black embossing powder. I do not use black embossing powder very often, but I really felt like the black would be really awesome for this particular card. So that is what we're going to do for the first background. And I made a little mess with my embossing powder, so I just need to go tap the excess of that back into the dish. I am going to heat emboss this background then using my heat tool. I always make sure that my heat tool has warmed up for a good 20 or 30 seconds away from the cardstock before bringing it to the paper and then hitting both the front and the back to help minimize warping. I found that my cardstock did not really warp all that much. This ended up working out really, really well. And there is a lot of detail here, so I'm just taking my time, keeping the heat tool moving, and making sure that I have melted all the embossing powder everywhere on this background. So we're going to clean this stamp, go ahead and move this out of the way, and grab our second background. So the second background I'm using is the Magic Stars. And I love that these are kind of imperfect stars. They really make a great background. We're again going to start with a base of 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches of sea glass cardstock, and we're going to stamp this with our clear embossing ink and heat emboss with clear embossing powder. I do stamp it twice. I'm using a Stamper's Secret tool to help press the cover of my MISTI to get a really good coverage. Now this time I don't want my stars to be black, and I didn't really want them to be white. One of the benefits of starting with a colorful cardstock is that if you emboss with clear embossing powder, that color is going to be maintained when we add extra ink on top of this, which is what I was really wanting to see here. So we're going to use the same colors of Distress Oxide ink to ink up the panel, but we're going to be left with these beautiful light blue stars in the sky, which gives us a completely different look. So the first panel was heat embossed with black embossing powder. The second panel is embossed with clear embossing powder. So this is going to give kind of a tone-on-tone look. It's really kind of underwhelming as it is right now, but here in a second when we start adding the ink, it is going to be awesome. Let's move all of that out of the way, and I am going to grab my Waffle Flower Crafts mixed media mat here to ink on, and I am going to start with the stained glass background, applying the Prize Ribbon. This is the brand new color from Tim Holtz. Distress Oxide ink around the edges of the panel. So I'm really only leaving a little space in the center, but we're not even going to leave it this color. But I hardly had to press hard at all to get that color onto the cardstock. So it's definitely a lot easier when you start with a colored cardstock to begin with. Mermaid Lagoon is going in the center. I really love Prize Ribbon and Mermaid Lagoon together. And then we're going to deepen and darken the edges with Black Soot. I know this looks terrible right now. This doesn't look like a good blend at all, but we're just gonna lay that black down, and then we'll actually go back and grab our Prize Ribbon, and we're going to blend out into the black, softening those edges and just really deepening the color on our panel. It's starting to look more like a celestial kind of night sky type of card, and a little bit more Mermaid Lagoon in the center. Now, any of that ink is sitting on top of the embossed area, so I'm just taking a microfiber cloth and buffing away any of that ink, leaving us with the crisp stained glass background. Isn't that so pretty? Let's go ahead and take our Magic Stars background, and we're going to do the same thing, except a little bit of that black ink is getting picked up from my mat. So I didn't do a really good clean. I just kind of did a quick clean with my microfiber cloth, and I'm going to go ahead and add Prize Ribbon all the way around the edges. But see how those clear embossed stars are resisting the ink? I love this. It's gonna, when we buff the ink away, they'll be even more prominent. I love the look of these light blue stars in the background. Mermaid Lagoon in the center again, and of course our Black Soot around the edges. Again, it looks terrible to start with, but it always looks better after we get all of that color in place. I always tend to err on the side of caution of lighter, and then I'll work my way darker, and then I go back and blend out extra to make sure that it doesn't have any harsh edges. And then a little more Mermaid Lagoon before buffing away any of that ink sitting on top of the embossed areas. Look how pretty those stars are. I absolutely love them. I think they looked really, really fun. Now next, we are going to add some little bit of splatter to our card backgrounds for extra interest and distress. We're going to use the brushed pewter distress paint. I am going to just put it on an acrylic block. I'm going to mix it up a little bit better first. I'm going to use a small paintbrush to pick this up and flick it all over my backgrounds. And I was pretty generous with this. I want little like splatters of silver all over. And I'm going to do this to both backgrounds and then set them aside to completely dry while I work on die cutting, inking of the extra elements that need inked, trimming sentiment strips, anything else that needs to happen for this card I will do after I have created the backgrounds. And I did this purposely because I knew that there would be quite a bit of drying time here. It won't take too terrible long, but it will take a little bit. So these are the moons, the full moon and then the half moon from the brand new Night Sky die set. In this set, there's clouds, moons, some stars, and some other little dies. I am inking these up with Mustard Seed and Wild Honey Distress Oxide inks. And then I'm going to set those aside. You'll also notice that I have lots of die cuts over here on the side of my screen. And we're back. The backgrounds have dried and we're ready to start assembling. The moons, the clouds, all are from the Night Sky die set. The clouds were die cut from a combination of white cardstock and Lawn Fawn pearlescent vellum. I love the two of these. With vellum though, it's always tricky to figure out the best way to get it to adhere to your card. Well, I find that adhering it with some Xyron sticker maker is my favorite because it just puts a nice even layer of adhesive all over the back, and then we're going to add these to the background. So I'm going to start with the Shoot for the Stars card first. the one with the stained glass background. We're going to add some clouds and things before adding our sentiment. These are pretty simple in design. There's a lot of layers. There's a lot of stamped layers, inking layers, embossed layers, and then our actual die cut layers, but pretty simple as far as the design of the background. So I added a few clouds. They are hanging off the edge. That's okay. We can always come back after a bit and trim off that excess. I do want to save any of those little excess pieces because I ended up using them a few times. The Shoot for the Stars sentiment was die cut from both black cardstock and silver holographic cardstock from Simon Says Stamp. And I'm going to put some glue on the back of the black cardstock sentiment first and position that on my background. And then I'm going to go ahead and add adhesive to the holographic cardstock and slightly offset it so that the black just gives a little bit of a shadow effect for our greeting. I love this sentiment. I think it's really pretty. I like the font, and I think it works so nice with all of these other elements. I know I heard from a couple of you that you were excited to see the Celestial cards or the products from the Make Magic release. These are definitely so much fun. And then I'm just kind of gently laying that down so that you can see little peaks of the black around my letters. I think it also makes it a little bit more legible. And then I'll put an acrylic block on top to kind of help hold that flat. Here is that Xyron stick. Well, here's some clouds, but I'm also going to grab my Xyron sticker maker again and add adhesive to the vellum clouds. While some of the glue is drying on the Shoot for the Stars card, we're going to work on the magical card. This is the one with the half moon. Very similar in design as far as we're using clouds and we're using moons and all of that good stuff. Just kind of starting with the backgrounds and working our way upwards. I had a really hard time figuring out where to put this cloud. I don't know why. And I do try to put a couple of things through the Xyron sticker maker at a time so that I'm not wasting adhesive. So you'll notice I did go ahead and do both clouds, even though I don't really have anywhere to go with the bigger cloud at the moment. I will add that to one of my backgrounds in a little bit. We're just going to play around and figure out where we want that cloud to go. I still don't love that. I'm going to peel it up. I really played around with this forever. I don't know why. I just couldn't get it to look the way I wanted. I also die cut a background for the word magical from the pearlescent vellum. I am not going to use that. We're going to do what we did for Shoot for the Stars and die cut it again from black cardstock and just kind of offset it. I think I like that better. Laying both of them out on the background, sometimes I have to see it. Sometimes I just don't know. The sentiment strips here, I did trim out, and then we're going to adhere those with foam adhesive to both card backgrounds. Shoot for the Stars reads, "The world needs more magical people like you." I love just the positive feel of this card. I think it's, or the positive feel of the sentiment. I love that. And then that extra little cloud piece is trimmed from the cloud up high, but I am going to use some of those leftover pieces. So when you're trimming off anything hanging off the edge, a lot of times those pieces can be used so you don't actually have to die cut extra images, which is one of my favorite things. So we're just adding all of these little extra clouds. I'm trying to figure out what I want to do down here. I don't want to do that. I don't like that. I think I'll go ahead and use this bigger pearlescent cloud. And I like that. I think we're going to end up doing that. And then just trimming off the excess. And I am going to save that on the backing sheet for my Xyron. So there is the dies I used. Just kind of a quick peek so you can see exactly what was used where. Now, the Magic Stars is kind of a circular shape and it has all kinds of stars in it. You can see I've put them in a little dish here to use. These were all die cut from holographic cardstock as well, and then they will be adhered throughout both card designs. I actually was left with a ton of leftovers that I am simply going to save because they can be used for cards later on. You get tons and tons of stars here. These are really awesome, and I love them out of the holographic cardstock. This is a new sequin pack from the Make Magic release. I think I'm gonna put these in another little dish so that I can add these to the card as well. Just a little scattering of sequins in with our holographic stars I think will be really pretty. I am going to add some little clear gemstones to the centers of my sequins though, to give them a bit more of a finished look. I'm going to use the little Honeybee Stamps Crystal Prism gem stickers. And I'm trying to figure out where all I want those sequins to go before I adhere them. And then I'm using an embellishment wand and the Barely glue to pop those down in place. So this card is just about finished. We have just a few more sequins and things to add, and then we will work on the second card, which is going to take a little bit more work to finish up the sentiment, but basically it's very, very similar to this one. We're just using different supplies. I really wanted to show how you can use different supplies, different embossing colors, for different cards. They're both celestial, you know, starry, make magic kind of cards, but they use completely different supplies. There is a little bit of crossover with the moon and clouds and stars and things, but sentiments are different. We're going to use a little stamping on the magical one, a little stamped sentiment. They both have the sentiment strips and things like that as well. Sentiment strips are so awesome. A little note, I did not do it for the card here today, but you can, because these are printed with laser ink, you can run them through your Mink machine and foil them. So you could even foil them into like some silver or something like that if you wanted to match your design. So there is the Shoot for the Cards card all finished. Let's go ahead and take our leftover little pearlescent vellum cloud piece. We're going to use that. We're going to add maybe another cloud here to this card. And then go ahead and start adhering our sentiment. I am going to adhere the sentiment strip with foam adhesive, and I purposely have left this next part in the video because I really wanted to show my process here. Because I popped up this sentiment with foam adhesive, I want it to be closer to the word magical. I want it to be closer to the sentiment strip than what I can really achieve, but I don't really want the loop in the letter G to be covered up by the sentiment strip. Well, if I adhere it like this, I'm going to lose part of that, or it's going to be really far away from the sentiment strip. And it's not really far away, but it's further away than I actually really like. So I went so far as I put glue on the back of this, and I went to put it on my background, and I instantly realized my mistake, that this isn't going to look good. It's going to look better if it is up high. So I'm going to kind of just take some of that glue off of the back, and I'm going to set it aside for a minute so it dries a bit. And then I'm going to piece together little mini sentiment strips all over the background of this. I am not going to do it on camera. It did take a minute to add all of those little adhesive pieces to the back of the word magical. That way I don't have adhesive on the bottom loop of the letter G. It can slightly overlap the sentiment strip, and it's just buddied up closer to the sentiment strip, which I like a lot more. So I'm basically waiting for the glue on the back of the word magical to dry just a tiny bit, and then I did place my foam adhesive all over the back. So there's kind of what it looks like. I am going to go ahead and position this on my card and adhere it in place. I took the opportunity to adhere a few of those magic stars to the background as well, and I like that a lot better. I think popped up, it's a little bit more, it just looks better to me. It definitely took a little bit of effort though to trim all of those little pieces of sentiment strip. Now let's add some more of those holographic stars. You can see that even though I have used quite a few, we have a lot left, which is totally fine. I want to add some of the sequins as well. So I'm going to add some extra little dabs of glue and go ahead and add those. We're going to put the crystal clear gems in the centers of these as well. I just like all the little details here that give it that magical celestial feel. For the rest of this sentiment, we are going to use a greeting from the stamp set that matches the magical word die. There's also the word magical in 3 different fonts in the Magical to Me stamp set, plus dies that coordinate. So you could stamp the word on cardstock and die cut it if you wanted to. I am going to stamp the phrase "I hope your day is" on some smooth white cardstock using Simon Says Stamp soft navy ink, and then we'll die cut that with a sentiment label die and pop it up with foam adhesive. So all of the sentiments on this card are popped up with foam adhesive. We are almost done with everything for this card design. I just need to stamp that. I felt like the first time it didn't stamp the greatest, so I stamped it twice. I am using my Misty. There's the sentiment label that I ran it through one direction and then ran it through the other to get it in a little strip. You could definitely just trim that with a paper trimmer if you wanted to. Foam adhesive on the back. And then we'll just pop that in place and adhere the whole panel to a top fold card base to finish the card design. Here are all of the products I used. So this is the Magical to Me stamp set that I used. You can see that you could also stamp it, as I was mentioning earlier. The night sky dies with the moon and the clouds that I used. The magical word die that I used for this card. The magic stars, and then of course the magic stars background. And the sentiment strips. For the Shoot for the Stars card, we again have our sentiment strips. We have our Shoot for the Stars word die, our stained glass background, the magic stars, and the night sky pieces. Thank you guys so much for joining me today for these 2 Celestial Make Magic cards featuring stamps, dies, and other products from the Simon Says Stamp Make Magic release. The supplies I used to create my cards are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Here is another video featuring Make Magic products that you might be interested in. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell to never miss a new card making video. Thank you guys so much for joining me today, and we'll catch you next time.